So where do I start? I've been in retail for 30 years, probably more than 30 years. This thing about, looking at a store as a kind of live website is something I think I've kind of lived for at least the last 15 years. And trying to look at, especially getting more and more jealous as Google kind of gave all the websites all the cool data, and yet inside a store, you could maybe just manage to get the count through the front door and everything else was kind of gut feel and all these old retail things we kind of talk about. So the last 30 years I've been really privileged and honored to work for companies such as IKEA, Nike. Still my pride and joy is that big Nike town in Oxford Circus, which was just the most fun job in the world, I think. Also working with Nokia back in the day and going through the rise and fall of the great Nokia. And then working with Nokia's huge competitor, Apple, out in Cupertino as well. So I've kind of lived all around the world, lived in Japan, lived in California, lived in Finland, would you believe? And just all the time looking at retail and how we can improve retail and how we can improve customer experience. And so really what I want to talk about is a bit of the reasons why. So why we need to improve this at retail and why it's so important, and then relate it back to the website. The company I work for right now is a company called Prism. So I went from the biggest company in the world to one of the smallest companies in the world and joined a startup. And we're based out of California, out of San Francisco. And what we do basically, we take all the cameras that exist in retailers today and we turn the cameras into business intelligence tools. So we have a lot of very smart software runs on the back of the cameras that people already have. And we basically supply the data that online stores get to offline stores. And of course, it's transformational in how it can improve businesses in that kind of field. So I'll show you a little bit about that later. One of the reasons I've worked in retail, and I think it's always dangerous to say that you've worked 30 years in retail because you immediately get this kind of dinosaur thing that, I know it all because I've been 30 years in retail. You don't know it all. You only know what happened last week, last year. Everything before is good learning probably, but it's not a base to base anything currently now on, because things have changed so much and they change constantly. Whether it's anything to do with the economy or new products or new technology, new centers, new things happening online, it all changes things at retail. And if you're not on the ball and on that game and have your data, then you start to fail, and it's a challenging place to be. So I think in retail, the one thing that's consistent is that it always changes. And the companies that follow that change are the ones that tend to make it, and the rest sort of stand around wondering why. And that's a dangerous place to be. And the reason even more recently is this. And I remember talking about this back in Nokia in the day. We used to talk about the third screen being the phone and things like this. But now when you think about it, you're watching one right now, you'll watch one in the cinema, you'll watch your TV, you'll look at your computer, you'll look at your iPad, you'll look at your phone, and now Apple have made you look at your watch, So, and then they'll probably find some way of getting it into your eyewear as well when that eventually works. So we're constantly looking at these screens. And I think the balance with a retail store is how to get away from the screen and get into some kind of reality, even though the brands manufacture that reality, but getting more into a real tangible world. And I think getting the balance between the two is a really good place to be. So this thing, I've realized over the years, and I think any company that doesn't realize is maybe in a bit of trouble, that the consumer is the only person you go after. The consumer decides whether they buy from you, whether they shop with you, whether they visit your website, whatever they do with you. You can, of course, do a lot of stuff to influence that, but ultimately that person that you want to shop is the only person you should be looking after. And the consumer decides in retail based on what you do with them, the experiences you deliver. Back in the day when we opened Nike Town London, that was one of the first stores with the Nike Towns that was really all about just pure experience. And it was, I wasn't really working for Nike retail, I was working for Nike marketing. And that whole tool, that Nike Town was a complete marketing exercise. But the interesting thing about it was, and still is, the most phenomenally successful piece of retail for Nike, which is why 15, 16 years later now, that store is still going and a huge success on one of the most expensive spots in the world. But it works. But you've got to really understand the dynamic of influence in that customer. And I think I meet now daily in my new role over the last couple of years, I meet companies that just don't get this. And they're kind of, well, we've opened these stores, we've done this, we've got the website up and running, everything works. Why are we not successful? And because somewhere in the mix of that, they miss that there's a consumer there and they're forgetting to think from that perspective. So always looking at that customer and almost reversing your whole trend so that you're saying, well, here's this person, what do they want? What do I know about their lives? What do they need? And how do I match all that stuff to them? And that's where it starts to get far more interesting. And the stores, no matter what we say, I believe this 100%, these are the most powerful media. When you get this right, you influence everything. Of course you need all the other channels, you need all the online and all the social stuff to work with it. But this is the real place. This is, rubber hitting the road, whatever, it's where it all comes together. And maybe I'd just share an example of something that influenced me massively, was when I went out to IKEA in Japan, and I went there because it was a kind of personal thing of wanting to live in Japan and wanting to work and understand a little bit more about that culture. But when I got there, IKEA had built the biggest stores in the world. The stores in Tokyo are the biggest IKEAs you'll ever see, and you know how big an IKEA is, so when you almost double the size, it's just huge. They had the largest traffic in the world. There was more people going to these stores. One of the stores at Yokohama in South Tokyo has 50% more traffic than the second busiest store outside of Japan. So just millions of people. But it wasn't successful. It wasn't hitting its sales targets. There was things going on in the store of visitors, and it sold more meatballs than anyone else in the world, right? The restaurants were the most phenomenally successful restaurants, but no one was buying furniture. And of course, IKEA lives and dies on selling furniture. And when I got there, there was a whole load of stories about, well, it's because we haven't got futons. Our sofas are too big. We haven't got furniture for a tatami room. We haven't, and all these kind of stories about why we weren't successful in Japan. So we went back talking to a lot of co-workers, which is always a good thing to do. And there was 3,500 Japanese co-workers already in the team in IKEA Japan. Their point of view was that we weren't listening. We weren't listening to the Japanese people. We weren't listening to the market. And fundamentally, we didn't understand how Japanese people lived. And so we took that on board. And we went out to Japan. Through all the co-workers, we got access to hundreds of homes. And we went inside these homes and tried to understand, how do they use kitchens? Do they dine here? How do they sleep? Where do they sleep? All these kind of things that maybe you should do in every single market. And through that whole process, we ended up calling this whole thing Life at Home in Japan, and we worked through how people lived. And we realized that the customer really was feeling, IKEA's not for me. We realized that we were on all the best youth dating sites as the #1 place to take your girlfriend for a first date. So they would go to IKEA, they would go around, they'd look at all the cool, really big Swedish rooms, big Swedish kitchens, all this kind of foreign stuff. We were like kind of, Swedish Disneyland, Come and visit, have a laugh at all the way that all the foreigners live, and then go and have some meatballs, because that's cool, we like kind of foreign stuff, and have a cheap date with your first date, and have a really nice time, and maybe buy something in the market hall and go away with a few trinkets. So when we realized this, we thought, oh my God, we've just got this so wrong. And it wasn't to do with our websites and all, people loved us. They loved us as a, some kind of attraction. So they all came in their droves to kind of experience Sweden. So after all the survey and cutting a long story short, we also realized we weren't serving people like Isetan and all the big department stores in Tokyo. We were kind of, IKEA, you do it all yourself. And the Japanese are, what? I never do it myself. Someone's here to serve me and help me. So we took a huge radical change. If you now go to the IKEAs in Japan, you'll see they have tatami rooms. All the apartments in the showrooms of IKEA Japan are the same size as Japanese houses. They have the jo and tatami measurements so that the customer understands this room matches my room. They have things like earthquake beams in them, small kitchens, all the stuff that Japanese have. And we rented about 4 apartments in Shinagawa in Tokyo, and we did them up as IKEA apartments and brought all the press in and did this whole thing as well, then did a huge online and called our stuff made for Japan. So we changed it all the way around and said that IKEA is made for Japan. So we never reinvented one product. We never, decided to go for futons instead of beds. We did everything as it should be. The moment we changed that showroom, it was like turning a switch because we already had the traffic. So the moment people just went, aha, this would fit, they did it. And there's amazing stories of customers would just come in and say, I want that room. And we'd be going, you want the sofa? You want the bed? No, I want the room. The pictures, the lights, the curtains, the floor, everything. And they would take everything. So it was just transformational in that country. But the lesson is the consumer was deciding. And we were not giving them anything to take from that. We were just giving them a nice experience and a nice foreign meal. But we were not giving them what they needed for their homes. So I think I've always learned that lesson from there that, you might be a big international brand and big international brands say, we just take our concept and we do it the same everywhere we go. But when it comes to some of these brands, that doesn't work. And you really have to understand that local consumer as well. But what it demonstrated as well was the store was immensely powerful. We didn't do a lot online to change. We kind of promoted made for Japan and all this kind of stuff. But what happened when they came into the store and it just clicked that, this is for us. This is more for us. The other thing we learned was don't say that IKEA is quality in Japan. Because quality in Japan means, that little old guy who's carved a tree into a cabinet and he spent a year doing it and it's the top end piece of furniture in the world. So when we said we were quality, the Japanese were, what? How can you call this quality? And then we just changed that to value for money and the whole thing snowballed. So really this tuning into your customer and understanding how powerful this store is. And again, just changing signs from quality to value for money was transformational in that store. So a very, very powerful tool. Everyone throws around all these numbers. So I thought I'd throw around the highest one I could find, which was 94%. And that came from Forbes. And that was done by eMarketer as well, about the number of retail transactions taking place in store. I don't know if that number, people say 90, 85. I can find a million numbers on this. What's still true, though, is that when you do it right, the trade is still in the store. And really, the point in eMarketer was that the analysis and the research is all done online, but the touching and the buying and the trialing is done in the store. So you will still draw a lot of people to your store by getting it right online, but then the service has to match. When you come in, when you find that thing online, it's got to be there. It's got to be as the promise. The price has got to be right, all these kind of things. So the store is massively important. And I think, it's a case of why is it so important? Why is it so relevant? And I think these things are all the reasons that we have today. It's still the only place where you'll get the 360 brand immersion, where you're actually involved in the whole space. It's still the only place you get a true face-to-face relationship and a discussion with a person from that brand or from that retailer, that's for sure. And it's consultative, and things are tangible, and you can touch them and feel them. And a lot of the things we do today is we look at product, and we can identify through the cameras the product that's touched and not touched, and how many times it's lifted, and all these kind of things. And then you really see that people, they maybe looked online, they came in the store, but when they got their hands on the product, something went wrong there. Now, by knowing that that product was touched, we can at least say, so is it quality? Is it price? What is it that put them off? So they didn't buy it, but they went up and they got involved with it, but they didn't buy it. Was it service? All these things. But we can get the answers to these questions now in store, because beyond the click in the website, we can actually see that click in the store when the people actually touch. And then, of course, instant gratification. Everyone's working on this. I want it and I want it now, and Amazon's trying to fly these things to you as quick as possible. But, getting the product right there, the store is still that place. And, of course, social and localization as well, which I'll talk about. But, at the end of the day, I think the whole thing is, from all the research we do, people just love shopping, right? They love to go out with their friends, go to stores, talk about things, try things on, and get involved with product, and they love shopping. And I don't think online will ever replace that. but online can drive it, and that's the key part. So looking at omnichannel now, and some of the people, surprise, surprise, the people I know very well, but when you look at IKEA now, back in the day when I started with IKEA, it was all self-serve. Everyone has to do everything. Now it's changed. You know, in Japan, we started the service where we said, you've seen the adverts now, I guess they're all over the place, that, you know, the guy doesn't want to go down and lift the stuff off the shelf, so he can pay some money and the IKEA staff will take it off the shelves for him. We started that in Japan. And I remember Ingvar had said to us, we were crazy, because he said no one's going to pay, what did we charge, 3,000 yen to get their stuff put on a cart just to do that and go through the checkouts. They do it in their droves. I would do it. Paying that much money when you've got wardrobes, you only need to go down there and try lifting that stuff off the shelf, and you'll soon pay for it. So really what IKEA is doing is now doing something it never thought it would do, but it's charging for all these services. And because the low price and value in that company is so high, the services are good as well, and everyone's happy to pay to take that effort off and improve. I think for years people have been complaining about the lack of service. Now they pay for it and they're quite happy. But they've really got it. IKEA now is almost 100% online. You can buy all that product now online. So they've really mastered the way of saying, whenever you want to buy it, wherever you want to buy it, wherever you want it delivered to, every channel is being utilized fully, and that's when it works. In Nike, in Kichijoji, I think it is, in Tokyo, they just opened a store in November. And it's right beside, I think it's Inashira Park, one of the parks in Tokyo where everyone goes running. And it's the main running park. And they've opened a store that is a store for runners. And it's 5,000 square feet. And when you go to that store, if you've joined Nike Plus, and everyone goes, right, it's the most popular running park in Tokyo. If you've joined Nike Plus, you can borrow shoes. So the latest shoes are there for you to trial. So you're going for your run and you'll pick up a pair of shoes that you want to try and see what they're like. If you're in the club, they'll give you coaching lessons. They do runs almost every day of the week where you go out as groups from the store and run, and you're coached while you run. They do on machines in the store, they're actually showing people where things are going wrong or right with their running. You can even fill up your water bottle, borrow a towel, and they have lockers there so that you can lock your gear away while you run. And there's a whole online community that's working with that store as well. And it's just one of the most incredible examples now, I think, of the whole thing coming together. Everything kind of twisting together into that one experience, online, offline. Of course, they've got the apps, and you record your runs are shown in the store and all kinds of stuff. So it's just a huge, I think, one of the best examples right now of how to bring the whole piece together. So if you ever get a chance, Japan always leads the way with a lot of this stuff. And it's just really interesting to see how that store works. So getting back to the e-commerce and the data, and my lifelong frustration, I think, of knowing exactly what's happening. And you know the guys in, well, we know online, and all the, you know, we know exactly where people go. We know the products they click on. We know what they buy, what they don't buy. We know the journey that they take through the store, and they know the time they take to do it. So everything you get from online in that kind of two-dimensional way. And what do the retailers want? Well, it's not different. In fact, it's maybe even a little bit more. Really exact visitors numbers. You know, we really want to know that. We want to know where every one of them go. We want to know that conversion to customers, and even deeper, you know, how many units per transaction, average sales, all that kind of stuff. They want to know the products and displays that people look at and what they do and don't touch. Very, very important. What they buy and don't buy, how long they stay in areas, all these kind of things, and how long they take to go through the store. And you'll hear this thing about customer journey. And people are so strapped for time. The biggest request to us all the time is about dwell and occupancy. How long do people stay in spaces? Can we increase that length of time? Can we put in another experience that helps people stay? Is it product? Is it staff? Is it training? All these kind of things we have to work into to get that extended time in the store. And, you know, the technology is already here. The kind of stuff we do. We're looking at counting, dwell, heat maps, path maps, reports. Normally this slide moves, but it's not moving. And one of the things you see in here that is very clever in our technology is all these sites you see, the views you see in here, there's people in there. There could be 100 people in this picture here. But the privacy things, the laws now on privacy are so severe. We worked out a way to basically deconstruct video. So we take the pictures of the people out, we process them out in the store. And so when it goes to retailers, you can give access to this to your merchandise departments, your store design departments. All these kind of people can look into the stores, and the people are just removed. And that's probably the biggest magic about what we do. But all the path maps and everything else we do just allow people to understand what's going through a store. So really, it's online analytics working in the offline space. And so getting back to the retailer that I'm not allowed to talk about, that I worked with for quite a few years, and I was heading up the channels all across the world. And I think the last message from me is that this is really the truth. You know, when you look at Apple and you look at what Steve Jobs did, and if you remember back to when he launched the first Apple retail stores, and everyone thought he was crazy. He was building these big stores to sell what was basically a Mac and an iPod at the time. And now you've got these temples to Apple that are all over the world with traffic beyond belief, with sales beyond belief, and it's not about the space. And it's not about, the sales per square foot are huge, but it's because the experience is done 100% correctly, in my opinion, on these stores. So yeah, it's volume now, and of course they have problems like every other retailer, but the basic idea of having a place to go, it's all centered around these stores. And in the channel part that I was running, there's now way over 2,000 franchise-type stores all around the world. You've got them here in Spain. You've got one up on Quechua up on the road there, where we took it and shrunk it into a smaller franchise model and set that 2,000 of these around the world following the lead of this, and it's phenomenal. But experience. So much time training people and making sure that when people came to the store, they live up to the actual dream. So that was it from me. I thought I'd try and keep it to the 20 minutes so that if there is any questions, you can ask them. So I'm happy to answer anything you want to throw at me. Okay.
¿Alguna pregunta? Any question? Nobody?
Great, then it was clear.
Just one question.
Okay.
Do you have any data of how much you can improve the conversion in retail stores after analyzing the paths of people?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, I can't share the retailers, but we change conversion from, we increase sales, if you like, which is the main thing, anywhere between 3 and 30%.
Oh.
So we've even taken, we've done analyses on footwear walls and things like this in retailers, and we've been able to impact up to 30% sales increase,
That's
which is huge.
Great numbers.
It's huge, yeah.
Perfect. ¿Alguna otra pregunta?
Yeah.
Una preguntita ahí. Ahora te llevan el micro. Sí.
Thank you. I have a problem talking today, so I need the microphone.
Okay.
I was wondering if you have ever participated in an attempt to measure like the cross-channel journey. You had stores experience and you had the online experience.
Yeah.
Any success trying to map that into one journey? You know, somebody that came online, then went to the store, then they did something else. I know it's really difficult, but that's even an attempt would be, no?
That would be great. We know the people that use our tool online, and we get a lot from in-stores, you know, of more anecdotal, you know, that, oh, the guy found this and he came in and we had it and stuff like that, but no actual, it'd be great to roll that into some kind of data. But no, that's maybe the next step. That's a great idea.
So not even
if you know how
study,
to do that,
nothing.
let's talk later. Yeah.
There is a shop in New York, I think. It's called Bubble Bar, and it's a jewelry shop online. Mm-hmm. And the person who owns the shop online usually do a pop-up store using the online with iPads and all these kind of things. And she creates an experience.
Yeah.
but only just for a week or a weekend or I don't know.
Yeah.
And she creates the experience, and she use also the online site and the website, and everyone can see the product.
Yep.
But also, if you want to buy it, you have to buy it online. You can test all the products, but you have to buy it online.
So a lot of stores work in that way now. We work with a store in Den Haag in the Netherlands that's a store of the future, and it's got a lot of that in it. So we have a lot of retailers in that store that basically they don't staff their areas. So they maybe have some product samples so that people can touch and try it, and then you do the order online in the store. And very similar concept, but we monitor all their traffic to find out what products and what brands are being the most successful within that space. So it's that is a trend in retail now, to just allow people to come in, look at the product, because the touch and feel is the part that misses completely from online. But if you can do that and then still place the order online, that's another way to do it. But you're still visiting a retail space when you do that, you know, and that's the part.
¿Una pregunta más? No? Thank you so much,
Okay,
Cliff.
thank you.
Really interesting.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you.
So where do I start? I've been in retail for 30 years, probably more than 30 years. This thing about, you know, looking at a store as a kind of live website is something I think I've kind of lived for at least the last 15 years. And trying to look at, especially getting more and more jealous as Google kind of gave all the websites all the cool data, and yet inside a store you could maybe just manage to get the count through the front door, and everything else was kind of gut feel and all these old retail things we kind of talk about. So the last 30 years I've been really privileged and honored by the data that online stores get to offline stores. And of course it's transformational in how it can improve businesses in that kind of field. So I'll show you a little bit about that later. You know, one of the reasons I've worked in retail, and I think it's always dangerous to say that you've worked 30 years in retail, because you immediately get this kind of dinosaur thing that, you know, I know it all because I've been 30 years in retail. You don't know it all. You only know what happened last week, last year. Everything before is good learning probably, but it's not a base to base anything currently now on, because things have changed so much, and they change constantly. To work for companies such as IKEA, Nike, still my pride and joy is that big Nike town in Oxford Circus, which was just the most fun job in the world, I think. Also working with Nokia back in the day, and going through the rise and fall of the great Nokia. And then working with Nokia's huge competitor, Apple, out in Cupertino as well. So I've kind of lived all around the world, lived in Japan, lived in California, lived in Finland, would you believe? And just all the time looking at retail and how we can improve retail and how we can improve customer experience. And so really, whether it's you know, anything to do with the economy or new products or new technology, new centers, new things happening online, it all changes things at retail. And if you're not on the ball and on that game and have your data, then you start to fail, and it's a challenging place to be. So I think in retail, the one thing that's consistent is that it always changes. And the companies that follow that change are the ones that tend to make it, and the rest sort of stand around wondering why. And that's a dangerous place to be. And the reason even more recently is this. And I remember talking about this. What I want to talk about is a bit of the reasons why. So why we need to improve this at retail and why it's so important, and then relate it back to the website. The company I work for right now is a company called Prism. So I went from the biggest company in the world to one of the smallest companies in the world and joined a startup. And we're based out of California, out of San Francisco. And what we do basically, we take all the cameras that exist in retailers today, and we turn the cameras into business intelligence tools. So we have a lot of very smart software runs on the back of the cameras that people already have, and we basically supply